Hey guys, we're going to build another slide today, and today we're going to build a Mekko slide in ThinkCell. Now this video isn't exactly about how you technically build a Mekko chart, it's more about how you take an insight or a data point and show it using a Mekko chart in a way that's compelling and really drives home your point with clarity. This is a slide we're going to make. Alright, let's jump into it. Alright, we're going to start in Excel. Now here's some data that I have about global banking revenues. And what I can see here is that the majority of banking revenue comes from balance sheet revenue. So you see 2085 compared to fee-based revenue, which is 1871. But what you can see here is that although total revenue is higher for balance sheet products, net profit after tax is actually lower. So the insights I want to show on my PowerPoint slide are: yes, the majority of banking revenue comes from their balance sheet products like lending and deposits. However, the total net profit after tax actually comes from fee-based products. With that, let's jump into PowerPoint. Now, as I just said, there are two insights that we want to show. So when I think about how to format this slide, I'm going to at least need two charts. There's a type of slide called a two-panel slide, and I'll just quickly show you how that might look. We'll have one header here and one header here, and underneath each of them we'll have different insights. The first insight we want to show is that the majority of revenue come from banks' balance sheet products. Now the data that we have, I'll quickly jump back into Excel, has a few dimensions, right? It has a dimension across the top, which is the product type, and a dimension here, which is the type of revenue it generates. Now when I think about these two dimensions, the one thing that comes to mind is that we're going to need a chart that shows them. And the best chart for something like that is actually a Marimekko or a Mekko chart. So let's jump into PowerPoint and drop in a Mekko chart. So here's the Mekko chart. What I normally like to do is just to delete all the labels because they're not formatted well out of the box. So let's do that. So you might be wondering, how did I know exactly what chart I wanted to use? There's actually a bit of a science behind this, and there's a kind of a decision tree as to what chart that you should use for what type of data or insight. And that decision tree is based on the number of dimensions, but also the type of thing that you're trying to do. Are you trying to show a comparison? Are you trying to show a distribution? Are you trying to show a makeup of something? If you want more information on that, please check out slidescience.co. We have a full course on how to take data or take insights and build compelling slides, and that includes stuff like picking the right chart for the right type of data. So I highly recommend you check that out. So now I've got the Marimekko chart. A couple of things I think are pretty important. First thing I'll do is I'll add the labels back in but format them. And two, the colors are quite similar, so I'm going to make them a little bit more distinct. First thing I can see here is that it actually looks quite similar. Like as I look at this Mekko chart, it's hard for me to understand exactly which one is bigger. Is the green bigger or is the blue bigger? I suspect they're pretty similar actually. That can be our first panel, but I think in the second panel, we're going to have to make it clear exactly what the breakdown is, balance sheet revenue versus fee-based revenue. And in that second panel, we can also have the breakdown of net profit, and we can compare the two, right? We can have a stacked column chart that shows the breakdown of revenue and a stacked column chart that has the breakdown of net profit. So I'll do that now. Okay, that's clearer. We can see that the revenue breakdown is tilted towards balance sheet revenue. It's 52.7%, whereas the net profit after tax is actually tilted way more to fee-based products, 64.9%. It's worth noting I also just changed the colors so they're consistent across the charts. One important thing is that if you have multiple charts showing the same data, make sure that all of the colors are consistent across the charts. Now what I'll do is I'll just tidy up all the labels and I'll tidy up our two panels to make them look a bit nicer, and I'll put some headers in there too to explain exactly what we're looking at. One thing that's playing on my mind is that I have the series labels in there twice. So there's two sets of balance sheet revenue labels and two sets of fee-based revenue labels. Now I wonder whether I can combine the charts in some way, so I only have to use one set of labels. I'm going to play with this now and see if it actually makes sense. And yeah, and if not, we can change it back. All right, so what I've done is I've connected basically these two charts by using a label that sits right in between them both. You can see here the green is the balance sheet revenue, the blue is the fee-based revenue. Look, this is a stylistic decision. I think it does take a little bit away from the clarity of the slide, but I think it does make things look a little bit neater. So if this was kind of real life, I'd actually just test this with a couple of people, make sure they understand exactly what the green and what the blue is without too much thinking. Let's assume that this works okay. Couple of missing pieces left. First is we need to label both of the charts, and the second is we need a lead in for the slide. So I'll start with the labels. Labels are done. Just to explain how I formatted the labels, I like to have the description of the chart in bold at the top, and underneath that it's important to have the time period, the metric, currency if that's relevant, but also I like to include the total for a Mekko chart because it's very hard to understand what the total is without having to do the math. Finally, I'm going to put a lead in the slide, which is the header or the title. So some people like to put in a title, which is something like banking revenue and net profit. That's true. It does describe what's in the slide, but it doesn't actually describe the insight. And what you want to do is allow the reader to quickly understand the insight without having to figure it out themselves. So generally for these lead-ins or headers, I like to write exactly what the insight is. So let's drop that in. And then finally, one of the most important things on this slide is actually the comparison between total revenue here and total NPAT here. Because we're comparing the composition of revenue and NPAT, we're comparing how the balance sheet and the fee-based revenues make up those numbers. What is important to do is actually some dotted lines that connect them. So it makes it a little bit clearer. It draws the eyes from the revenue to the NPAT, and we can see that, balance sheet goes from 52.7 to 35.1. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comment box down below. Hope that was useful.